Oh no.
Good morning.
Morning. 1 second. What's going on here? What's he done? Oh. Hey.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Morning. Right. I was logged into, my son had logged into a different account. I was wondering why no one was on. Okay.
I was wondering why you hadn't started, because I was logged in, ready to go, and nothing was happening.
So I'm just going to go and 1 second. I'm just going to go and get my papers from the printer. 1 second. So let me just do that. Just keep chatting for now, and I will be back momentarily, as they say in America. Right.
Oh, hello. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Deborah.
Hi. Hi, good morning.
And Beryl, is that? Hi, Beryl.
Yes. Hi, good morning.
Are Pam and Julian away?
They're in Israel, aren't they?
Okay, lovely.
I think so, anyway. I'm not sure when they come back. I think they're due back soon. Are they, Brenda? Do you know? I think they said they were going away for 3 weeks.
All right, yeah.
It's this. It's nothing to do with it. Well, that's what plugged into now. It has nothing to do with the Zoom. No, it has to do with the Zoom. Well, that's the gallery. Maybe we do have the full screen. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, our microphone wasn't working.
Oh, I think I heard you.
No, couldn't have. My microphone we have to log in. And
I must have been imagining it. I must have been imagining it.
I just gave you a wave, that's all. Yeah, Jeff gave
Oh.
a wave, he didn't speak.
Okay,
perhaps that was
a
it
moment.
then.
Right. Okay. It might be a bit shorter today again, possibly. Okay, morning all. We're just going live.
Morning, Rabbi.
Okay, I don't know. Did Pam and Julian say if they were joining us?
I don't know.
Okay, not to worry. Right. Okay, so just doing the live stream. Everyone okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Right. Okay.
Did you think of what you had to do?
Okay, here we go. Right, so let's share the screen as usual. Just getting open. Finding my PowerPoints. Oh, come on. Right. Terumah this week, isn't it? Yes. Ah, here we go. Right, just closing the door. Noisy. Okay. Right. Here we go. Okay. There's the 20th. Okay, ignore the date. The date's wrong. Second, ignore the date. Here we go. Okay, just ignore the date. Right. Okay, pretend it's the 20th on there. Okay, so Terumah, off we go. Right, Iris, your usual job, please. Thank you.
Right. The people of Israel are called upon to contribute 13. Sorry?
No, something beeped. Carry on.
Oh, it's my phone. Sorry.
Oh, right. The people of Israel are called upon to contribute 13 materials: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and red dyed wool, flax, goat hair, and animal skins, wood, olive oil, spices, and gems, out of which God says to Moses, "They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell amidst them." On the summit of Mount Sinai, Moses is given detailed instructions on how to construct this dwelling for God so that it could be readily dismantled, transported, and reassembled as the people journeyed in the desert. In the sanctuary's inner chamber, behind an artistically woven curtain, was the ark containing the tablets of testimony engraved with the 10 Commandments. On the ark's cover stood 2 winged cherubim hammered out of pure gold. In the outer chamber stood the 7-branched menorah and the table upon which the showbread was arranged. The sanctuary's 3 walls were fitted together from 48 upright wooden boards, each of which was overlaid with gold and held up by a pair of silver foundation sockets. The roof was formed of 3 layers of coverings: A, tapestries of multicolored wool and linen; B, a covering made of goat hair; C, a covering of ram and tachash skins. Across the front of the sanctuary was an embroidered screen held up by 5 posts. Surrounding the sanctuary and the copper-plated altar which fronted it was an enclosure of linen hangings supported by 60 wooden posts with silver hooks and trimmings and reinforced by copper stakes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so today we're going to look at this whole business of, there's a very famous line in this week's Sedra. It's on one of the slides coming up. Vasulim mikdash, you shall make for me a sanctuary, v'shochanti v'tocham, and I will dwell within them. Everyone familiar with this line? So you would expect it to say, I will dwell within it, but it doesn't say, I will dwell within them. It says the idea that God dwells, we make a sanctuary for God in the many things we do, not just in a physical building. So we have this paradox. On the one hand, we have this physical sanctuary, ultimately the base of the temple as well. On the other hand, Judaism is about putting God in a building or a box, right? So we've got this slight dichotomy. So we're going to have a little look at that and see what the real sense behind it is. It's the first ever house of worship, right? It's the first home for God, right? There were occasional, I mean, even Adam and Cain and Abel had, says they had a mizbech, they had an altar. I don't know exactly how they did that, but to have a formal building which has all kinds of very detailed specifications, this was the first, the Mishkan, right? Which was subsequently, of course, moved with them in the desert until they built the temple, right? So anyone see the contradiction immediately with the whole concept in Judaism?
Why should there be a place for God to live when he was all around us?
Right, God is everywhere. What do you need a physical building? Seems almost heretical. I mean, let's take a slightly silly comparison, right? It says they built the golden calf, because they needed some physical representation. Well, okay, what's the difference between a sculpture of a cow and a physical building when you say this is the house of God? What do you mean the house of God, right? Sure, the whole world is the house of God. Right? What kind of a God is this that needs a physical building? So King Solomon... Place? Sorry?
Is it a meeting place?
Right. So look, it's like the whole Mother's Day thing, right? Every day should be Mother's Day. Okay, but you know what? It doesn't do any harm once a year to remember your mother, right? Yom Kippur, every day we should do Teshuvah. But we need a focal point. So having a focal point doesn't negate the bigger picture, right? You should, tonight is our 21st wedding anniversary. We're going away to, going to Windsor actually overnight. Got an Airbnb. Anyway, unlike the chief rabbi, we didn't get invited for a sleepover in the palace. So, but anyway, I figured we used to go there when we lived in Cardiff. We used to go there. It was a nice English place to take all the American relatives. So we thought, you know what, we know the area. It's not too far from London. We can pick up food on the way. Anyway, so your anniversary, you get a nice card, a nice message, some flowers for you. What do you mean? You should do that every day for your spouse. Okay, but we have a focal point, right? We have certain things, times of year. Judaism is all about this, right? Shabbos, right? You spend more time with your family, right? It's a time of quality time. You should have quality time every day, right? Pesach, we remember the Exodus. We're supposed to remember it every day, and so on and so forth. So Jeff is right. It's quite a common thing in Judaism to have. Usually, it's points in time rather than points in space, but points in time that mark a particular commemoration. Right? On a yacht type, we remember our relatives. It doesn't mean we don't remember them the whole year, but there's a focal point. So to have a focal point, so we're talking about time, but you could say the same thing in space. Yes, to have a focal point doesn't mean that God isn't there the rest of the space. But nonetheless, it's a good question, right? How do you build a physical, or more fundamentally, what is the physical home to an intimate God? Right? Who built the temple? Besides Herod, King Solomon, right? So he asked this, he wasn't a fool, he was very wise. He asked this very question. This is from 1 Kings, chapter 8. Who wants to read?
I'll read if you like.
Go on.
But would God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this house have I built? King
Right, so he builds the temple and immediately acknowledges the limitation. Right? This is the Haftarah we say on every Rosh Chodesh. This is from Isaiah. Who'd like to read number 2? Anyone? Volunteer?
Thus said the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where could you build a house for me? What place could you serve as my abode?
So we can't build a home for God. It's impossible. He's infinite. And also it shouldn't be necessary. He can be accessible anywhere. In the deepest pit, in the highest mountain, in a slum, in a palace. He doesn't live in buildings, contrary to what centuries of Anglo-Judaism will tell you about synagogues and sacred buildings. Right? He doesn't live in buildings. So the obvious question is, so what's the point then of building a building? Well, here's the clue. Right? This is the quote I just said. Right? V'asuli mikdash, let them make for me a sanctuary. And I, as a result of that, will dwell among them, not dwell in it, dwell among them. Okay, very beautiful. So you can understand it metaphorically. Make a place for God, and therefore you let him in, right? And metaphorically, that makes sense. Make a place for God, and he will dwell wherever you let him in your heart. It's not what it says. It says, make a place, a physical place for me. How does making a physical place for God help him to dwell in a more general sense, because he is infinite? So the clue is actually in the aftermath of the golden calf. Right? They've made the calf. Moses has been up the mountain for 40 days. As often happens in Jewish history, it happened in the Megillah as well with Haman. People miscalculate things. Right? Somebody sent me a message. I'll be in town from Monday. And they sent this message about 8 o'clock this morning. So I said, do you mean this Monday or next Monday? I realized they were actually in New York when they sent it, and therefore it was Sunday. And they mean this week. Right? But it's easy to get confused. Right? In America, they say this week and next week has a different meaning. So I think in America, if you say next Monday, it means next Tuesday, it means tomorrow. Whereas in England, you say this Tuesday, I think. So it's very easy to get confused about time, right? Classic thing, right? I'll see you in 10 days' time. The deadline is 10 days from now. Is it 10 days or 9 days? Do you have to do it before the deadline or up to the deadline? So anyway, they miscalculated. When Moshe's there, everything's fine because, God talks through Moshe. But when he's away for nearly 6 weeks, they panic, right? They need something to bridge the gap. They need an intermediary. God says to Moshe, they need an intermediary. We've seen that from the calf. So in the aftermath of that, and it's interesting because the calf, of course, occurs in Ki Sisa in a few weeks' time, but we know the chronology is not always exact in order in the Torah. So really, it's the aftermath of that they build the Mishkan, right? Because they have the giving of the Torah, we have the 40 days, you have Moses smashing the tablets. Then ultimately after that, we have the commandment of the Mishkan, although it appears in a different order in the Torah. So we see that they need a physical place. They need a place to go. We told everyone during COVID, you can go pray at home. You don't need a shul, whatever. But there's still, a person sometimes person, if they need to. Look, I don't always manage to daven with a minyan. I aspire to try to come to shul to daven Mincha Ma'ariv, even when I daven on my own. Because it's still a place of holiness where people gather for prayers, where we have the Ark and the Sifrei Torah. I don't always manage it, but it's somewhere in my aspiration. Rather than just standing in my dining room at home to daven, which is fine, perfectly 100% kosher. If I have my wits about me, I try to actually come. And it's also quite peaceful also when there's no one else there and you stand in the base medrash. There's something special about it. So we've always had this, but actually it comes from a failing on our part. We saw from the calf the need for some physical representation, right? Which is obviously very delicate, that, right? Moshe himself is the physical representation of God in this world. Doesn't mean he's the son of God in the Christian sense, but he's somebody that people relate to, that's their prophet, that's their connection. When he disappears, they have no bridge with the infinite God. So Hashem says, they'll build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. What's the word for dwell? Shochen. A shechuna is a neighborhood in Hebrew. A shechen is a neighbor. And shechina means the divine presence, to dwell, to be nearby, to be close. So we need a closeness to God. It's no coincidence. That's the word for the divine presence in Hebrew, is the shechina, something that's close to us. A neighbor, somebody next door. Right? We don't need some distant God that's up a mountain. We need that feeling of closeness. And if we need a physical place to do that, then so be it. We look at our matriarchs and patriarchs, God spoke to them. So God spoke to Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov, Sarah, directly. He talked to them. He appeared to Yaakov. That's not the experience that they'd had through the book of Shemos. Right? They were slaves in Egypt. God was concealed, essentially. They saw the plagues. They saw the dividing of the sea. They saw the manna from heaven. They saw the water from the rock. They heard the only encounter they've had with God is when he speaks to them at Mount Sinai and they pass out from the rapture and the overexposure to spirituality, right? So it's interesting, by the way, the patriarchs and matriarchs is before the giving of the Torah. When we're told that the spirituality worked differently, that after giving of the Torah, every mitzvah we do bridges the infinite and the finite. Before the giving of the Torah, we don't have that. We're told they did certain mitzvahs, but it didn't have the same power of connection. But on the other hand, God came to them more. So post Matan Torah, yes, God's always talking to Moshe. Moshe goes up the mountain and talks to God. God told us 2 commandments. We couldn't cope. We passed out. We nearly died from the shock of seeing this visualization. So they don't have that closeness. They have a far off God, a powerful, awesome God, but they don't have that closeness. Right? We even see that, right? Oh, I skipped to this. Whoops. Yeah, source number 4. Who'd like to read number 4?
I'll do the next one. You speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey. But let not God speak to us, lest we die.
Right? So Moshe, you speak to us, you convey the messages to us. We're scared of God. If he speaks to us, we'll go blind and deaf. It's too much. We saw from the first 2 commandments, this is after the giving of 10 commandments, right? The story on the mountain. And they say, you be our mouthpiece because God's too blinding for us. So that doesn't work. We need God to be accessible. So how is God accessible? So according to Hasidic and Kabbalistic tradition, basically we learn a lot about something called tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means a contraction. So it comes up a bit sometimes in the Tanya class. It may come up in the earlier years as well. So how does an infinite God fit into a finite world, a limited world? The answer is the only way to do it is to basically contract, to condense the essence. Right? In the same way that the only way you can enjoy the light of the sun is through some kind of filter. You need a blind or you need sunglasses. Otherwise, it's too bright, it's too blinding. It's great blinding, bright light, but it's too much. It's the same thing with God. When God shines with his full light, because he is infinite and he is God, we can't go. We pass out from the shock like we did at Har Sinai. So how do we bring God into everyday life? The answer is you have to distill that essence. That's what tzimtzum is, we call it in Kabbalistic terms. So therefore, God has to dwell somehow in this physical world. How does he do that? He says, if you make for me a mikdash, a holy, sanctified place, a sanctuary, I will dwell there, meaning my Shekhinah will rest in a way that is accessible to you. It won't be overpowering and blinding because it will be contained. So it's not necessarily the idea that this particular building, it's the idea that when we sanctify the physical world, we make a dwelling place for God. Every mitzvah we do brings sanctity into everyday life. Right? We talk about this so much. Right? You take money is the most material thing in the world. You take a coin, you put it in a tzedakah box. You just elevated the whole concept of wealth. Right? Human intimacy is the most natural desire in the world. So don't sow your wild oats. Get married and have a wholesome relationship with your partner. And if appropriate, please go to the mikveh once a month. But enjoy that. Enjoy it. The mitzvah, enjoy it. But do it in a framework. You want to drink alcohol? Drink it in moderation for kiddush. Right? You want to eat fine wine, nice food? Fine, but have it for simcha. Don't just stuff your face. You want to have a good shlof? That's great. But make sure that you wake up full of energy to serve God. You don't just sleep until midday. Right? You own a shop, you're in business in some way of buying and selling, great. Make sure you do it in an honest way, and that brings holiness to what you're doing. Right? Give 10% to charity, and that brings holiness to what you're doing. Buying a suit, check it for shatnez. That way infuses it with holiness, etc., etc. Right? The food you eat is the most basic human desire, but by eating kosher food and making a bracha, one elevates the act of eating, and so on. Most of the mitzvahs we do involve the physical world, actually, if you think about it. They involve, physical objects or people, or very few mitzvahs that are abstract. There's a few, I suppose prayer, fear of God, right? Love your neighbor is somewhat abstract. But most mitzvahs are practical. So this is the mystery of, if you like, the mystical whatever of the mitzvah, that it's great to go up the mountain and feel God. It's great to go to the kotel and feel God. That's great and everything. But what about in the humdrum of everyday life? So he says, Vasili Mikdash, if you make for me a sanctuary, I will dwell with you. That has a double meaning. First of all, it means a physical sanctuary, whether that's the temple or the Mishkan, which is a place, or our shuls, right? Our base medrashes, places that we reserve. Most shuls you'll have, okay, our shul is flexible space, but in most shuls you'll have something called a sanctuary. And you don't just use it for random events. You don't just have your board meetings in there. You have it for maybe services or for shiurim or for a Jewish concert, something appropriate, a wedding. You don't just use it for random things. Right? Or a base medrash is a place set aside for prayer or learning. You don't just rent it out for meetings or for social events. If you look in halacha, you're not really supposed to eat or drink in shul. By the way, shuls didn't have a mezuzah traditionally on the actual shul. Why? Because it's not a place where you live. It's a very specific place. And nowadays, our shuls are multi-purpose, and we have breakfast, and we have coffee in the base medrash, and all these things. And we're a bit more relaxed about these things. But there's a concept. This is a place. It's a sanctuary. So there's the physical manifestation of that, and what that means. Place of holiness, a place of sanctity, a place you treat with great awe and respect, because this is where you go to connect to God. This is where God's presence is felt. That doesn't mean it's not felt elsewhere, but this is where it's concentrated. Right? You don't have to be in a classroom to teach. We know you can teach online, right? If there's a flood, you might go to the gym to teach maths. But the fact is, the classroom has a certain, order to it. It has certain facilities, etc. Right? Your doctor can come around to your house, and it's very helpful, a house visit. He won't necessarily, or she won't necessarily have all the same tools or the same kind of equipment that they've got in their surgery. It doesn't mean the surgery is the only place you can practice medicine, but it's a place that's set aside, etc., right? Many kosher caterers, I don't know if you've seen this, but they don't use non-kosher kitchens. They basically bring tables and they bring ovens and they set up their own kitchen, right? It's much easier to use an existing one, but you can take it on the road with you. So you can take God on the road with you. You don't have to be in shul. But a shul, a mishkan, a sanctuary, a temple, these are places that we focus and we really, put effort into connecting with God. But on the other hand, Ba'asuli Mikdash means more generally, when you make a place of holiness for me, that's not just a physical place, it's a place in the more holistic sense. So when in your everyday life, you acknowledge God, whether it's by davening or making a bracha or being honest in your dealings, following the halachas of the Torah, whatever they may be, then I will dwell amongst you, says God. So he's not restricted to physical place. But the physical place is also kind of a metaphor for the idea. So as a result of building the temple, the message you should get from seeing the temple and building the temple is not this is the only place where God lives. The message should be This is the manifestation of God on earth. And on a smaller level, every time you do a mitzvah, it's a manifestation of God in your life. And that's why this is not some new age thing. The Torah itself says in this week's Torah, "V'asuli mikdash, you'll make for me a sanctuary, v'shochanti b'sercham, I will dwell in the children of Israel." Otherwise, it's a mistake. So the sanctuary is just a trigger, a springboard for us to understand God's manifestation in this world. Now, coming back to this actual sanctuary. So what is the key ingredient of this Mishkan that makes it so special? Any idea?
Yolk. Yolk.
Thinking a bit more kind of sort of philosophically, perhaps, sort of ideologically. Who paid for it?
Everyone.
Right. What's the name of this week's Parsha? Terumah. So it was paid for from donations.
Is it the half shekel that people gave?
I believe so, yes. But also other things. They bought silver and gold and, right? So here's the Rabbi Sachs. This is the key. The key is not the physical building, actually. The key is the giving that people gave, right? Sometimes, I mean, when you're asked to have a new Sefer Torah, they say a new Sefer Torah is a very powerful thing. Yes, it costs a lot of money and you have to raise money and there's that physical aspect of it. But what's bigger is that almost everyone will give something towards it. So when I was in Cardiff, they'd had a new Sefer Torah and someone had done a beautiful scroll. It was like it had a frame of a scroll around it and it had all the names of the people that gave, really beautifully inscribed. And it was in a nice cabinet on the wall. And I used to point it out when I did school visits and say, we had a new Torah scroll. It was before I came, but everybody took part and it was unified the community. It brought people together. Right? This is the big thing about fundraising. Besides giving money, all these campaigns, 5,000 donors gave to CST or whatever. Part of it is about giving. Part of it is the sense of community and the sense of achievement and coming together also, as much as anything else. So the giving is very important. I'm sure you remember I've mentioned before, I'll probably mention it in a few weeks' time. There's a lovely idea, right? There's 2 times it says that God showed Moshe something made of fire. Anyone know what they are?
Made of what? Sorry.
Right. Well, the bush.
Made of fire.
Fire.
Oh, besides the burn. 3 times, sorry, burning bush, quite right. There's 2 other times, I think. One time it's explicit and one time Rashi says that God showed Moshe a vision of something made of fire. Anyone know what they are?
The menorah.
Right, the menorah. So it says he showed him a fiery menorah so that he would see. I mean, the fire there is almost incidental, but it's a red hot glowing menorah. But more importantly, he could see how to make it because it was very intricate. Anyone know what the other one is? You do, because I've mentioned it before. It'll come back to you when I say it.
Yes.
So I think Rashi says regarding the half shekel, right? We read this last Shabbos. What does it say about the half shekel? It says, you will give half a shekel. And what's the reason it says? I don't know what it says after that. It gives a reason what it's for.
It'll go towards the running of the temple.
Yes, but it says something about it. What does it say about it? What is its mechanism? What is it doing for you? Don't remember?
Well,
it says something very specific.
Everybody gives what, it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor.
Yes.
It
says, the phrase it uses, which we read last Shabbos in the Mafta, is l'chaper al nafshosechem. L'chaper is from the root of Kippur, like Yom Kippur, means to atone. You will give this half shekel as an atonement. You'll give tzedakah. You'll give this half shekel as an atonement for your sins. So Rashi says, God showed Moshe a coin of fire. Right? Showed him a coin of fire.
Oh.
So the question is, why? I understand with the menorah that Moshe needed to see what it actually looks like. So Hashem showed him, because he's God, he didn't just show him a black and white menorah. He showed him a fiery, burning menorah. But what Moshe didn't know what a coin looks like, and now because he had a vision of a coin made of fire, suddenly he now knows what. Obviously, if God showed him, he had to have some kind of a question. So how does this answer any question? Right? So it says God showed him a coin of fire. It's a beautiful explanation. The key is the fire. Right? Fire represents heat, right? Enthusiasm, passion, right? They're on fire. You say, did you see that singer? He was on fire, right? The rabbi was on fire. He was giving a drasha, yeah? When we talk about fiery, like hell, fire and brimstone, yeah? Fiery, it was a fiery talk. So the key is the fire. It's not the coin. Moshe knows what a coin looks like. Moshe's question is, half a shekel, I don't know what half a shekel was in those days. Maybe it was more. But imagine 50p. If I told you that putting 50p in a box will be life-changing, it will atone for your sins. You'd look at me like you say, listen, £500,000 I understand, but 50p? As they say in Yiddish, nishta hin, nishta her. It's nothing. It's neither here nor there. So God says to Moshe, no. It's not the coin, it's the fire. When you give with fire and passion and enthusiasm, and you're hot, you're warm, you're lit up, then that can have tremendous power to atone. It's not the act, it's what goes with it. So maybe the same thing here. It's not the giving of the gold or silver to the Mishkan. Anyone can give, listen, sometimes people give more enthusiastically or more reluctantly. It's the idea of giving and the sort of ideology of being a giver. That we give thanks, we give gratitude, we give to someone else, we give to God, being a giver. Right? In Hebrew, ahava, the Hebrew word ahava is from hav, which means to give. That is the key. So it's not about necessarily this beautiful Mishkan they built with all the wall hangings. That's important. It's the fact that everybody gave to it, right? So when you get your new Sefer Torah, everyone says it's a beautiful Sefer Torah. You say, you know what the most beautiful thing about the Sefer Torah is? 300 people all participated in it and shared in it, right? The most amazing thing about this campaign is not that it raised £2 million. It's that 500 school children went out and raised little bits of money for it and took part in the mitzvah and got involved, right? Yeah?
Yes,
that's sorry?
It's more important of the children giving a small amount than the big person that may be a millionaire or a billionaire gives money. It means more to them.
Oh, sorry, what have I done here? So this, Mary, says Rabbi Sachs, this is the key. The key is not the building of the Mishkan. The key is the process that leads up to it, right? It's the opportunity to give. Let's have a look. Right, who would like to do number 5? This is what the beginning of this week's Sedra.
I'll read.
Go,
It's Deborah.
Sorry, Deborah.
All right. Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart is so moved.
Right, there we go. The person who feels inclined to give, maybe comes back to the fire and the passion again. God says, that's the contribution. That's what will build the Mishkan. What will build the Mishkan? Yes, silver and gold and coins and bricks and mortar, but it's what that represents. That represents a gift from a Jew who feels moved to give. Giving is what it's all about. How do you encounter God? Through chesed, through giving to another. Now, we use that giving to build a Mishkan, but there's something more fundamental there, right? That's why God didn't just say, close your eyes for 30 seconds and I'm God, so I'll just make this Mishkan drop out of the sky, right? They had a lot of hard work to do to build it. It's a very special idea. So also, because when we give back to God, we're acknowledging what he gives to us.
And also, if something is just given to you, just like you said, like God saying, okay, you shut your eyes and I'll make you a Mishkan, and it just pops up. If you actually have to work for something, you appreciate it more than something that comes to you easily with no labor on your part. Right.
So also when you give to others, it becomes a culture of giving. You then appreciate the fact that you're giving someone else means you appreciate what God gives you, because you don't give to others if you're a selfish person who, thinks everything is mine. So the very act of giving opens up a certain recognition that life is a gift and what we have is a gift. And we are thankful, right? And of course, we should believe in God, by the way. So how do we come close to God? It's not the wood, the metal, the hangings. That's just the icing on the cake. It's that it was built from gifts of people who felt moved to give. That's the most beautiful thing in the world, right? It's like the kid that makes a card for their parent, right? Now you can have a kid that makes a really scribbly card. You can have a kid that makes a really, really, really professional looking card. But it's still going to be ultimately, the best thing about it is that your kid made it for you. So of course, if they do a more professional job and they stick bits on and it's 3D and you open it and it's, looks professional, that's great. It doesn't matter if it doesn't, right? I'm not saying things shouldn't be professional, right? If your grandchildren decide to make a video presentation, you're going to love it no matter what. But obviously, if it's very professional looking, you're going to be really impressed as well. So that's not to say we can't, when we have a mitzvah to do, we can't do it in the most professional, impressive way. So you don't have to build a mud hut for God. You can build a place that's befitting his presence. And the truth is, the same way you want your own home to be a little bit more comfortable, same thing should go with the house of God as well. There's a shul in Florida, in Bal Harbour, which is a very wealthy neighborhood, I think, near Miami Beach, just outside Miami Beach, called The Shul. Just called The Shul, that's the name of it. The Shul of Bal Harbour, and everyone knows it as The Shul. It's very plush. Millions of dollars were spent on it. It's a very, very wealthy neighborhood. And when they set up the shul, the Rebbe said to them that your shul should have the same, why should it not have the same feel as the people in the neighborhood, the kind of homes they live in? That's not a contradiction that you should go to a shul that has, I don't know, bare floor and hard wooden benches, but in your home you have soft sofas and whatever, up to a point. So it should be a place of comfort. So the Mishkan doesn't have to be basic, it can be sophisticated. But really, it's just a vehicle. It's a vehicle for us, A, by giving, B, by realizing that when we have a manifestation of God in some physical way in this world, that's what a mitzvah is. But there's two things. There's the giving and then the actual paradigm itself. So the giving is very powerful. The fact that they gave voluntarily is extremely powerful. In fact, you may recall, this is the first and only time that I know of in history when somebody stopped the campaign because they raised too much money. Anyone remember that? Moshe says people were bringing too much, and Moshe said, enough, no more. So I think in this week's or next week's Sedra.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's never happened before, and I doubt it will ever happen again, that a campaign got stopped because there was too much money. Right? It's not a common problem to have. Right? Yes, I want to give something to your campaign. Oh no, we raised too much money, we've closed it. Right? And that, by the way, is why this parsha is called Terumah. Terumah is about the gift and the donation. It's not called Mishkan or, I don't know, something about building. It's about the giving. The giving is the operative part. The giving that triggers this spiritual, whatever you want to call it. See what Rabbi Sachs has to say, and we'll conclude with that. So who would like to read Rabbi Sachs? Who hasn't read? Anyone who hasn't read yet? Can't see everyone, sorry. Beryl, do you want to read? Can you see?
God doesn't live in a house of stone. He lives in the heart of those who give. Yes, very good.
Right, but it doesn't mean you don't need a physical place to connect. It means, right, you can live in a nice house. We should also know that it's just bricks and mortar. Right, there's more to a house. What makes a house a home is, right, Rabbi Sachs used to say, quote it at many weddings, it's in the front of the original kashrut guide, really Jewish food guide. So the Jewish home is like a warm bed on a cold night. First you warm it up and then it warms you up. You put in your candlesticks and your mezuzahs and your Jewish books and your kosher kitchen and whatever, right? And then that in turn makes it into a warm place, into a home, right? Otherwise it's just a house, right? Unfortunately, when people are widowed, they often feel, that the house, the same house that they lived in all those years, nothing's changed, but it doesn't have the same presence, right? When the kids leave home, you downsize or whatever, right? Or you build an extension in some cases, yeah? Right? So it's the same idea. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have a nice home, right? You should have a nice home. Please God, we should all be blessed. We can afford a nice, not over the top, but the good things in life. But that's not really what it's about, right? That's like when you go to these fancy dinners and people say, yeah, it's ridiculous amount of money they spend on the food and the so and so. Look, usually it gets donated. And the reason that they do these things is to encourage people to give charity and to have a culture of giving and to give people a feeling of participating and being part of something. Somebody said 2 years ago, if you want someone to give a donation for a cause, the United Synagogue until now has survived on membership income, right? The fact is that the way the model's going is it's not going to work for the next generation. Most of them don't join shuls. It's already not working. You have to find other income streams, do fundraising or whatever. But anyway, organizations that do more fundraising perhaps and have less membership, when you get, my wife told me growing up in shul, sometimes the rabbi will put the electricity bill on the notice board and say, we have to cover this month. I don't think that's a very encouraging. I don't want to give to basically just the bottomless pit of, everyday costs. It's important to cover everyday costs. But you want someone to give, you can't someone say, this is your chance to partner with us in something that is, infinite, something that is the future of the Jewish people. You can be part of the solution rather than the problem. All these kind of things that we say to people, that's very exciting. It's very exhilarating. The giving itself is huge. To be a giver, to be a donor, right? Organizations treat their donors with a lot of respect, right? Something you might say is a bit over the top. It's a very special thing to be a giver, to be a donor. Not everyone can do it. And people give in different ways. And by the way, giving isn't only money, giving is time as well. That's why our shuls and our charities are special places and our schools, because they're not just full of people that get paid to do something. They're full of volunteers. They're full of people that give time. That's a very special thing. Right? A building has a soul because it's not just bricks and mortar. Of course, it's bricks and mortar. So it's the same thing about the Mishkan, same thing about the temple. It's a building, but the bigger issue is that people gave towards that building. They gave with a good heart, and it brought about giving, and giving is very important. So when you give to others, you're acknowledging your thanks for the gifts that you yourself have, right? It's a basic common sense. Right? If you're not appreciative of what you have, you won't give to others because you'll say, well, it's mine, right? If you acknowledge the gifts you have and you thank God for them, the logical thing then is to share. It's a very beautiful idea. So besides the Asuli Mikdash Shachanti B'Secha means that when you make for me a physical place, but also a metaphorical dwelling place, whether that's the mitzvahs you do, whether that's the davening you do in your shul, whatever, that when you make a place that sanctity not in your shul, anything that you do outside of buildings, right? So at home, you make Kiddush Friday night, right? Or you light your Shabbos candles, or you learn something, or you daven at home, whatever it is, like any mitzvah you care to name, you give tzedakah, right? You honor your parents, whatever it is, then you let God in, you make a dwelling place for God in this world. But also, what's the key to this is that it came about through their giving, their gifts, their generosity, their kindness, their willingness to give. So the other way of looking at it is, how do I bring God into the world? How do I make God feel comfortable in this world? It's not in a particular physical building necessarily. It's the idea that a vehicle for that is something that people have given to. So yes, if you get a new Sefer Torah and the whole community gives, that's very powerful. If you build a new building and everyone bought a brick, for £18 or whatever, that's very powerful. Very powerful. And that's one of the beautiful things about a lot of institutions and shuls and schools and community buildings is there is that element of community. Sometimes it's one person that gives, yes, but there is that element. So it's the giving more than anything else. Comes back to the fiery coin as well. It's not the coin in the box. That's an insignificant act. It's the thinking behind it and the passion, the enthusiasm with which it's done. So it's not the building of the Mishkan. That in itself is a very important event in Jewish history. But it's what it represents. It represents everyone getting together with a good heart to give. And it's the giving that's the powerful thing. And elsewhere we learn that chesed says that God is good, his nature is to do good, and that's why he created this world, to be able to share goodness. So anything that gives to others, chesed and goodness, is also very powerful. When we talk about, right, how's anyone better at Latin than me? Imitato Dei, is that how you say it? Imitato Dei, I think, right? Emulating God. So imitato, I think so. So emulating God, right? It's a powerful idea in Judaism that we emulate his qualities. So chesed and kindness and giving is the ultimate act of God, basically. Right. My battery is about to go on my laptop, so if anyone's got any questions, ask them quickly. I've got 35%.
Could I ask quickly?
Sure.
With a shul, if there's a Sefer Torah there, does it still need a mezuzah?
So that was Korah's question, right? If you have a room full of Sifrei Torah, why do you put a mezuzah on the door? So the Sefer Torah is irrelevant, by the way. It's not the Sefer Torah. If you have a Sefer Torah in your living room, I'm sitting now in our base medrash, you've got 4 Sifrei Torah in the ark here. We have got mezuzahs on the door. I actually asked Binstock if we need mezuzahs, and because the issue with the shul is, it's not entirely clear you need a mezuzah on a shop or an office either. I know people often put one. It's a nice sign of Jewish whatever. But mezuzah primarily is where you dwell, where you live. You don't live in a shul or base medrash. You go there to daven. It's very important. But you don't live there. So nowadays, though, we do other things in our shuls. We eat, we drink, we sleep occasionally. So the consideration is not so much the Sefer Torah, it's more the usage. So when you have a shul, like I'm thinking like, Beehive Lane, the shul is a shul. I don't think they use the sanctuary for anything else. Weddings, maybe. It's not a room that lends itself to other things, really. You might have a concert in there or something. So there's probably an argument for not putting a mezuzah on the door. Our shul here is very multi-purpose. We use it for lots of different things. So it makes sense to have a mezuzah on the door. I happen to believe, and a lot of rabbis have said this over the years, we should put mezuzahs on. We're not talking about the front door of a shul building, by the way. We're talking about the door into the actual sanctuary. Strictly speaking, halakha doesn't require a mezuzah. I happen to feel, and a lot of rabbanim said this to me over the years, agreed, that you should put mezuzahs on doors in and out of shuls because you don't need to say a bracha, you put it up without a bracha, whatever. Because first of all, we do use them for multi-purpose. We do use them for living type things as well, eating, drinking, sleeping. But more importantly, there is a common myth that you only need a mezuzah on your front door, right? You ever come across this? Yeah. I remember the shul secretary in Cardiff years ago, a lady called them and said, how many mezuzahs do I need for my house? I think really you only need one on the front door. I said, can you please not answer questions about Judaism, especially when you get it wrong? Can you please refer them to me? So if someone walks into shul and basically sees no mezuzah except for the front door, then that may just kind of reinforce that idea. So I think it's better to put them up. But strictly speaking, a pure shul, which is a sanctuary, which is set aside for prayer, does not halachically require mezuzah because that's not a place you would live in. Right? In the same way that in the sukkah, you're supposed to do things you do when you're living at home, right? So sleeping, eating and drinking, learning, whatever, right? It's open to debate. I definitely wouldn't make a broch on the mezuzah in a shul building itself, right? On the kitchen, on the classrooms, for sure. But yes, the Sefer Torah is not the issue. The Korach famously asked the question, right? Korach said to Moshe, if you have a room full of Sifrei Torah, do you still need a mezuzah? He was making fun of him, saying like, you got like, Sifrei Torah, why do you need a tiny scroll on the door? And the answer actually is very profound. Do you know the answer? The answer I saw somewhere is that the Sifrei Torah on the inside, the mezuzah is on the outside. So even if you have lots of Torah on the inside, it has to spread to the outside.
Right.
So the mezuzah represents the broader, wider. Anyway, that's not the same. It's a more Kabbalistic reason, but an interesting idea. The Sefer Torah itself is not the issue. It's what the use of the room is. By the way, there's a whole sensitivity around bringing Sifrei Torah to places like, for example, Shiva houses bring a Sefer Torah sometimes. First of all, you're supposed to use it 3 times, not just use it once. So that becomes a whole issue. That's why many Shiva houses in perhaps more religious communities have Shabbos mincha as well. So it gets used Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos. Second, you can't just stick a Sefer Torah in someone's bedroom, or you wouldn't stick it, obviously, anywhere near a bathroom or something like that. So they often have, I know, like when I was in Manchester with my friend Shiva, they have a small ark they bring to the Shiva house with the Sefer Torah and so on. But you would want it to be treated with respect as well. I think somebody asked me recently, Jeff Saltman, about living a residential accommodation on top of a shul. I do believe there is an issue about sleeping over a Sefer Torah. I don't know if the issue is sleeping or more the issue of what married couples might be doing. But I think there's an issue of you don't put a bedroom above like a Sefer Torah. So what do you do if you're in a little shtibel somewhere, everyone davens in the front room, and you've got an ark, and there may well be. So I don't know how all these things work. But yeah, the presence of the Sefer Torah is not relevant here necessarily. It's the usage of the building. Right? I mean, it's a very English thing to have a deconsecration service and a consecration service for shuls, right? They do it for cemeteries as well. They talk about consecrated ground. It's not a Bubba Meiser. There is a concept, even though you can daven anywhere, and you can put an ark up in your school or in your office, or there is actually in America, there is a train called the Long Island Railroad, which runs from Long Island, which has a lot of kind of suburban Jewish communities into Manhattan. It's about a 1-hour commute. And they have minyanim. I believe they have an ark with the Sefer Torah on one of the carriages. So that's their shul. People daven on the way in the mornings. They have shiurim and things. Look, if you have to get to work early, it makes sense to daven on the train. You're wasting an hour otherwise. So there is a concept, for example, that if you were having a temporary shul in I don't know, Milne Court, let's say we were rebuilding for some reason and we decided to have services in Milne Court, right? You wouldn't have a whole service of consecration that you're now turning this into a shul, where you actually say this will be our shul from now. You'd say we're using the room for services, and when we finish, we'll take the ark and the Sefer Torah away, and it's just a regular room. But a shul that you've basically set aside for prayer, and I'm not sure exactly how you consecrate a shul. I think it's by reading from the Torah in it. But there is a process of saying this is a sanctuary. This building is now a place of worship in halacha. You can't just decide to use it for something else. And the deconsecration, I'm not sure exactly what they do, but there is a process. It's not just some British, very English thing. There is a process to it. So with all that we've said, there is definitely a concept of sacred places, right? Houses of worship, place of worship, the temple itself. There are places you couldn't go, right? People don't go on the Temple Mount today unless they've been to the mikveh. Some people don't go at all. So there's always considerations. But if you think about it, in Judaism, it's almost the exception rather than the norm.
But
right?
Rabbi, what happens if you sell a synagogue to another religious, Sikhs or Islam or whatever?
You're not supposed to sell a shawl to somebody that will use it for something that's considered idolatry in halacha. Okay, so certain organizations are a bit naughty. What they do is they sell to brokers, to estate agents who basically flip it and sell them to churches, which is why many old shuls have become churches. I think Coventry Road became a church, didn't it?
Yeah.
We didn't sell it to the church, we sold it to an agent. Now, you might be thinking of Wembley Shul. Are you following the story of Wembley Shul? Right. So interestingly, I'll talk about the poster in a minute, if anyone's right. Interestingly, as far as I know, one of the less problematic things you can do with a shul is sell it to some Muslims, because they are monotheistic. There's nothing wrong with their prayer from a non-Jewish point of view. They have no symbols. They only worship one God. So in that sense, better that than, I don't know, pagans or Christians or whatever. The selling of shul is a very sensitive subject, because the reality is often shul is somewhere no one lives anymore, and you have to sell the building. You can't do anything with it. Once you sell the building, what are you selling it for? What's it being used for? It's a shul in Merthyr Tydfil that's now a gymnasium. That causes offense to people. What can you do, though? Who's going to preserve these places if there's no Jewish community? Now, Wembley Shul was sold, I think overtly, to a Muslim group, which put out this poster saying, former place of worship of non-believers.
Yeah.
So I believe, and we may have been hoodwinked here, but I think this is the truth, that actually it wasn't meant to be offensive at all. What do you call someone in Islam if you want to offend them and call them a non-believer, like in the most extreme terms? Anyone know? There's a famous comedy, infidel. What are you talking about infidels, right? An infidel is not someone who's a heretic, right? An idolater, right? So what do you call someone who is a monotheist but doesn't follow Islam? So the answer is a non-believer. So a non-believer in Islam is much better than infidel. So the suggestion is they didn't, because it doesn't make any sense. Why would you even say that? It's just offensive. So the suggestion was that what they were trying to communicate and did very badly was not some offensive anti-Semitic thing, actually. But what they were saying, and they showed a picture, is that, this wasn't a place of idol worship. It was a place used by non-believers in Islam. But that's okay. But they worded it very badly, because that's what, they've now changed it. And my understanding is that is the correct terminology they would use. Now, you may think it was just anti-Semitic. I don't know. The United Synagogue said they vetted the group. Listen, I don't know how you don't. There's never a right group to sell a shul to unless it's a Jewish group. Oh, some Orthodox shuls have been sold to non-Orthodox shuls. It also becomes an issue. One solution is not to consecrate your building for a shul. So, if you see that the community is transient, I don't know, if there's suddenly loads of Ukrainian Jewish refugees living in Walthamstow, fine. We'll start a minyan for them in, a community centre or something. You don't build a shul and make it into a shul. We'll say having a minyan once a week in this room. It doesn't make it a shul necessarily. That's what you would do, I think. But yeah, Wembley was quite interesting, that. I think it was just badly worded, but I think that was their intention. I do, because it makes more sense. Because non-believers is not really a derogatory term in Islam. You'd say infidels if you wanted to be rude. or idolaters. But Islam doesn't see Jews as that. As far as I know, Islam sees Jews and Christians. No, I think it sees Christians as idolaters, actually. They don't say that outright.
They're just people of the book.
Right. Yeah, that too.
Is it just the building, or is it the ground that the building stands on?
Good question. I think it's the building, because what they do is they deconsecrate buildings. They take out the Sifrei Torah and they say certain prayers that basically seem to remove the status. I don't know exactly how it works. So I think once you do that, if you knock it down, it's not the end of the world. It's an issue, by the way, when you're rebuilding a shul as to knocking down the old shul. There's all kinds of issues around that. You might know you knock it down to build a new one, but in the meantime, you're knocking down the only shul in town. How can you do that? So there are all kinds of issues that can arise. I'm not well up on all of these things. There's definitely a process for a space acquiring the specific status of a shul in halacha versus just being a place where you have a minyan. That's definitely the case. You know the joke about, I'm sure I told the joke, right, about the Catholic priest that lived next door to the Jewish guy? So the Catholic priest knocks on Mr. Goldstein's door. He says, Goldstein, how are you, my old friend? He says, yeah, thank God, how are you? He says, thank God, thank God. He says, listen, Goldstein. He says, we've been friends for years. You know, I always come around when you need something done on Shabbos. You know, I've come to your son's bar mitzvah. He says, obviously I didn't have a son, but, you know, I came to your son's bar mitzvahs. You know, we've been good friends. You know, I see you like very much like a brother in faith. He says, we're having a big campaign to raise new money to rebuild the church. He says, would you like to give something? I know you're a man of means. Goldstein says, Father, I love you like my own father, but I'm a religious Jew. I can't give to such a thing. It's just not, I can't do that. He says, but Goldstein, you have millions. Come on, there must be something you can do. He says, Father, I wish I could help you, but really it's, you know, it's just not appropriate. So he says, oh, Goldstein, he says, you know, he says, I'm so disappointed. So Goldstein says, wait a minute, I have a brilliant idea. He says, to build a new church, you're going to knock down the old one. He says, yeah. He says, for that, I'll give money.
I like that.
So, yes.
So, but there is an issue when you rebuild a shul. If you knock down the old shul first, how can you leave a neighborhood without a shul? So these are all interesting questions that arise. If you are ever building a shul, if you ever start a minyan somewhere, the answer is don't initially call it a shul. Don't take a building and say this will be our shul. So we're having a minyan in, you know, Labushari every Tuesday or whatever it is, King Solomon every Wednesday. That's it, it's a minyan. Once you start calling it a shul, and I'm not sure what makes it a shul in halacha. We can have a share, I'll look it up. There are certain things. The same with cemetery, there's a thing called consecrated ground. I'm not sure what you do to consecrate ground, but again, I think there's a certain process. It's not just, you know, it's not just that you buried someone there, you do something specific. When they do the extension at Bushy and Walnavi and things, they go through certain prayers and things. And I think once you do that, you can't just then sell it off. So there's a certain concept of status in Judaism. I have to look into exactly how it's done. Anyway, in the meantime, about to lose power. So have a good week, everyone.
Yes.
And you, Rabbi.
Next week, I think Pam and Julian will be back, which is very exciting.
Yes,
And
on Tuesday, I think.
Yeah.
Is that next Tuesday or this Tuesday?
This Tuesday, I think. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
No, I'm joking for the Americans, you said.
Yeah. Not just Americans. I have the same argument with my girl's mother every time we're talking about something that's happening in a few days' time. Is it this week or next week?
It's this week. This week.
Well, no, it's not so clear. I don't know because, and then you say, you know, and also like for me, the weekend's on Shabbos. So, if you say, you know, if I say on Friday, oh, we had a good share this Monday, right? To me, that means last Monday.
Yeah.
It's this week.
And
if you say on Thursday, next Sunday, next week means to me Sunday onwards. But then what does this Sunday mean?
Yeah.
This Sunday, next week. It's very confusing.
It is
confusing. The other thing that's very...
If you say that this Shabbos, you meant the Shabbos behind you.
So the other thing I've learned a lesson from is if you write an email, particularly in the evening. So for example, if I put a message on the mini group, we need one more person for tomorrow morning, right? Last night, inevitably someone will read it on Monday lunchtime and put, I can come, meaning for Tuesday. So what I now do is when I send an email or something, when I say to someone, if I send an email to Sunday night saying checking we're still meeting up tomorrow, Monday, I've had situations where someone reads it Monday and thinks it's Tuesday. So I always put the day. So I put just checking we're still meeting up tomorrow, brackets Monday, brackets close brackets. Because, you know, this is, in the old days, you'd send a letter and you put everything in detail, or you send an email before 5 o'clock, but now people work crazy hours. It's so much confusion about these things. So many times people
Well,
have people.
I have got confused on when you put a message about the Sunday morning share on Saturday night, and I've read it on Sunday, thinking it was for today's share.
Right.
Quite often, previous to this, I've done that several times. Sometime later, but I mean now.
Yeah, it depends when you read it.
Yeah.
Okay, we all get confused.
Right.
Some of us more than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Referring to myself, not to anybody else on this.
Well, have a good week, everybody.
Right.
Yes,
same to you.
you.
Okay, I'm going to head off. Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye then. Bye.
Bye. Be well.